So students, today we are going to talk about a part of the inner ear, that is the vestibular system. Now vestibular system जो है हमारे कान का, that is responsible for keeping our body in equilibrium, that is balance बनाना हमारी body का. So now if we talk about the equilibrium of the body, there are three important sensory organs which give inputs to the brain to maintain our body's posture. One is the vestibule of the ear, that is the inner ear. Second is the visual impulses that go from the eye, that is the ocular system. And third is the impulses that go from the joints of our body, right? So the knee joint, ankle joint, hand joint, ताकि हमारी position खराब ना हो जाए. This is called as proprioception. All right. So we are going to talk in ENT lectures about the system that is responsible for keeping balance, that is the vestibular system. So about the vestibular system, what we are going to study, let's just write down and let's understand what we are going to study about the vestibular system. ये vestibular system है कहाँ पे? सबसे पहले तो हम इसकी लोकेशन समझ लेते हैं. So if you remember the middle ear, हमने medial wall of middle ear हमने पढ़ा था. So this is the pinna. पिन्ना से हम जा रहे थे एक्सेलॉटरी कैनाल में, वहां से आ रहा था टिम्पैनिक मेम्ब्रेन, वहां से आ रहा था हमारा मिडल ईयर, और मिडल ईयर का ये है मीडियल वॉल ऑफ मिडल ईयर. इसके पीछे है हमारा इनर ईयर. सो दिस इज व्हाट वी कॉल एज द इनर ईयर. इनर ईयर इज कंपोज्ड ऑफ थ्री स्ट्रक्चर्स. वन इज द semicircular canals, then there is utricle and saccule, and then there is cochlea, right? So what is the inner ear composed of? It is composed of the semicircular canals. It is composed of the utricle and saccule, and it is composed of the cochlea. Now we know very well that the cochlea is responsible for hearing, and we will take this in our next lecture. Utricle, saccule and the semicircular canals together form the vestibule. Now the nerve that goes from the utricle and saccule is of course going to be called the vestibular nerve. What will it be called? Vestibular nerve. The nerve that goes from the cochlea will be called as the cochlear nerve, and together they will be called as the vestibulocochlear nerve or the eighth nerve, right? Now we will look at this vestibular system in a little detail. The first thing we will see is the semicircular canal. So now the semicircular canal are basically three in number. One is the superior semicircular canal. So one is the superior semicircular canal. The second is the lateral semicircular canal. So this is the lateral semicircular canal. And the third one is the posterior semicircular canal. It is the posterior semicircular canal. So हमारे बॉडी को हमें थ्री डायमेंशन में मेंटेन करना है. थ्री डायमेंशन क्या होती है? एक्स एक्सिस, वाई एक्सिस एंड द जेड एक्सिस, यानी सुपीरियर इंफीरियर, मीडियल लैटरल एंड एंटीरियर पोस्टीरियर. तो इन तीनों एक्सिस के अंदर में एक सेमीसर्कुलर कैनाल है. जो हमारा एक्स एक्सिस है उसके अंदर में है लेटरल सेमीसर्कुलर कैनाल, ऑल्सो समटाइम्स कॉल्ड एज द हॉरिजॉन्टल सेमीसर्कुलर कैनाल. देन वाई एक्सिस के अंदर में है हमारे पास में सुपीरियर सेमीसर्कुलर कैनाल, एंड जेड एक्सिस में है हमारे पास में पोस्टीरियर सेमीसर्कुलर कैनाल. सो एक्स एक्सिस, वाई एक्सिस एंड जेड एक्सिस. ठीक है, ये चीज समझ में आ गई. अगर ये समझ में आ गया तो ये समझ पाना बहुत सिंपल होगा कि सेमीसर्कुलर कैनाल हमारा बॉडी का बैलेंस कब मेंटेन करेगा? जब हम थ्री डायमेंशन की बात कर रहे हैं. देयरफॉर रिमेंबर दिस टर्म, इट इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर आवर थ्री डायमेंशनल और एंगुलर और rotational acceleration. This is a very common MCQ that you have to remember. This is a very common MCQ. In either form it can be asked. Semicircular canals are responsible for dash or which type of acceleration, or angular acceleration is maintained, or equilibrium in the angular acceleration is maintained by which of the following structure? Semicircular canal, utricle, saccule, cochlea. You're going to pick the answer semicircular canal. Compared to this, the saccule and the utricle are arranged more in the 90-degree fashion. So saccule is like this, utricle is like this, horizontal. Okay, so this is saccule, this is utricle. तो इस डायमेंशन से आपको समझ में आ गया होगा कि सैक्यूल हमारी बॉडी का बैलेंस कब मेंटेन करेगा, जब हम ऊपर नीचे जाएंगे. So saccule is responsible for our acceleration in the vertical dimension, right? So saccule will be responsible for vertical acceleration, whereas utricle will be responsible for our horizontal acceleration. It will be responsible for our horizontal acceleration. This vertical and horizontal acceleration is in one dimension, right? So this is called as linear acceleration. So you will get a question, which of the following structures is responsible for linear acceleration? Utricle, superior semicircular canal, inferior semicircular canal, or posterior semicircular canal? Then you will write the answer as utricle. So utricle और saccule जो है वो responsible है, जैसे मान लीजिए आप सीधे खड़े हैं और लिफ्ट में ऊपर नीचे जा रहे हैं, कोई मूवमेंट नहीं हो रहा एक्सेप्ट फॉर अप एंड डाउन. दैट टाइम द बॉडीज बैलेंस इज मेंटेन्ड बाय द सैक्यूल. मान लीजिए आप एक डायरेक्शन में देख रहे हैं और सीधा चल रहे हैं या पीछे आ रहे हैं, दैट विल बी मेंटेन्ड बाय व्हिच ऑर्गन? द यूट्रिकल. बट मान लीजिए आप झूले के अंदर गोल गोल घूम रहे हैं या आप लेफ्ट राइट देख रहे हैं, गोल गोल डांस कर रहे हैं, तो अब आपका एक्सीलरेशन कौन मेंटेन करेगा? द सेमी सर्कुलर कैनाल्स. इज दिस थिंग अंडरस्टूड? Very good. So now let us understand the ultrastructure of utricle and saccule and how do they maintain this balance. All right. So ये जो हमारा semicircular canal होता है, ये semicircular canal का जो end है, that is dilated like the हमारे फूल के नीचे एक green color का dilated part होता है ना, this is called as ampulla. All right. This is called as the ampulla. Now this ampulla का अगर मैं ultrastructure देखूंगा तो यहां पे होते हैं हमारे खूब सारे हेयर सेल्स. देयर आर लॉट ऑफ हेयर सेल्स ऑन दिस एम्प्यूला, लॉट ऑफ हेयर सेल्स, एंड देयर इज अ gelatinous material above it. This gelatinous material is called as the cupula and hair cells. Now these hair cells are of two types. Type 1 hair cell are the flask shaped hair cells. They are the flask shaped hair cells. Type 1. Type 2 hair cells are more cylindrical type of hair cells. Which are more common? Of course, type 1 are more common. इन hair cells के ऊपर में एक बड़ा hair cell होता है जिसको हम कहते हैं काइनोसीलियम, और उसके पास में कुछ छोटे होते हैं जिसको हम कहते हैं स्टीरियोसीलियम. All right. So you have got kinocilium, stereocilium. This kinocilium and stereocilium are connected to each other by some tip links or cross links. So now, when you are moving, what will happen? These hair cells will brush against the gelatinous material. Potassium channels will open up. Potassium influx will occur. This potassium influx is going to increase the resting membrane potential of the cell. In physiology, you have heard of something called as resting membrane potential. When it increases in voltage to more than 85 millivolts, then that leads to depolarization. That means excitation of that particular cell, right? And that excitation is going to release a neurotransmitter which is called as glutamate, and this glutamate is going to take the impulse along the vestibular nerve. All right, so this is how it will occur. Now where has this potassium come from? Let us understand. This semicircular canal has a fluid inside which is called as the endolymph, This is in the semicircular membranous semicircular canal called as endolymph. This endolymph is very, very rich in potassium. It is very, very rich in potassium. Where is this endolymph coming from? There are certain cells called as the dark cells. These dark cells are present in the vestibular system, in the semicircular canals and the utricle. They are not present in the saccule. They are not present in the saccule. Remember this. They are not present in the saccule. They are present in all the other parts of the vestibular system. And these dark cells produce the endolymph. Alright? Have you understood this? Something very similar is also happening in the utricle and saccule. So let us understand the ultrastructure of utricle and saccule. You have got the same flask type cells, that is type 1 cells, and cylindrical cells, that is type 2 cells. Alright? But the only difference is जो ऊपर gelatinous material था जिसको हमने नाम दिया था क्यूप्यूला, यहाँ पे उसका नाम है मैक्यूला. यहाँ पे उसका नाम है मैक्यूला. And this particular part contains some calcium carbonate crystals, some stone like structures, very hard, जैसे पत्थर हों. And this is called as otolith. This is made up of calcium carbonate. And therefore, this particular part of the ear, that is the utricle and saccule, are together called as the otolith organ also. Many times you will come across this term. Otolith organ is the utricle plus saccule. Alright. Now, this otolith organ is present where? In the macula. And where is the macula? In the utricle and saccule. So some important points that you have to remember over here is, first, the gelatinous material in the semicircular canal is called cupula, whereas the gelatinous material in utricle plus saccule is called as macula, and this macula contains calcium carbonate crystals called as the otolith. This is what you need to remember from the topic so far. Have you understood this very well? Wonderful. Now, if you have understood this, we will quickly take on one very small topic, जो इसी में important है, that is how do these cells get depolarized. So, if this is one kinocilium, this is one stereocilium, they are connected by tipplings. तो क्या होता है कि जैसे मान लीजिए ये हेयर सेल्स है, ये ब्रश करेंगे जब, when they are moving, they are getting brushed. The movement of this hair cell is the important part of the direction of the excitation. All right. So now what we have to understand is how do these hair cells get excited. इसके लिए there was a scientist, Dr. Ewald, who has given Ewald's laws. What does Ewald's law tell us? First law of Ewald is that the movement of the eye and the movement of the head is going to be in the direction of the movement of endolymph and the circular canal which is getting excited. अब ये बहुत confusing हो गया. कहने का मतलब क्या है? मान लीजिए मैं मूवमेंट लेफ्ट राइट कर रहा हूँ, तो मेरा हॉरिजॉन्टल सेमीसर्कुलर कैनाल अगर स्टिमुलेट हो रहा है तो मेरा आई का मूवमेंट भी लेफ्ट राइट होगा, निस्टैग्मस मेरा लेफ्ट राइट होगा. अगर मान लीजिए मेरा सुपीरियर सेमीसर्कुलर कैनाल स्टिमुलेट हो रहा है तो मेरा मूवमेंट अगर ऐसे ऐसे हो रहा है तो मेरा आई का मूवमेंट भी अप एंड डाउन होगा. और अगर मेरा एंटीरो पोस्टीरियरली जा रहा है, पोस्टीरियर सेमीसर्कुलर कैनाल हो रहा है, आई विल गेट अ रोटेशनल टाइप ऑफ मूवमेंट. ऑलराइट. So that is the Ewald's law. That is the direction of the head, and the direction of the eye movement is towards the direction of the semicircular canal or the endolymph movement. All right. Second is in the horizontal semicircular canal, that is the lateral semicircular canal or the horizontal semicircular canal, the excitation is always एम्प्यूलोपीटल. एम्प्यूलोपीटल का क्या मतलब है कि मान लीजिए ये एम्प्यूला है तो मूवमेंट ऑफ द एंडोलिम्फ शुड बी टुवर्ड्स द एम्प्यूला. whereas third law states that in the posterior semicircular canal or the superior semicircular canal, the movement is always ampulofugal. That means the movement should be away from the ampulla, ampulofugal. All right. Now, once we have understood this, let us very quickly understand what is the vestibular pathway. What is the vestibular pathway? Vestibular pathway is a very simple concept. मान लीजिए हमारा कोई हेड मूवमेंट हुआ, तो हेड मूवमेंट में क्या होगा, हमारे जो आइदर सेमी सर्कुलर कैनाल्स हो गए या यूट्रिकल एंड सैक्यूल हो गया, इनमें से कोई भी एरिया स्टिमुलेट हो जाएगा. ऑलराइट, स्टिमुलेशन ऑफ द वेस्टिबुलर सिस्टम. ओके, from here the nerves will take the stimulus. All right, the nerves will take the stimulus. So ऊपर से जाता है हमारा superior vestibular nerve, नीचे से जाता है हमारा inferior vestibular nerve, and they go to an area called as the vestibular ganglion. The name of this ganglion is Scarpa's ganglion. Scarpa's ganglion, which is very close to internal acoustic meatus. From here, the impulses will go to the vestibular nucleus, which is in the pons. All right, vestibular nucleus. And from here, the reflexes will come to the eye, and there will be a reflex which is called as vestibulo-ocular reflex. All right, is this thing clear? This is the vestibular pathway. Now, for the postgraduate students, this vestibular ganglion or the Scarpa's ganglion is divided into superior and inferior parts. The superior part takes the orientation from or impulses from superior semicircular canal and from the lateral semicircular canal and from the utricle, whereas the inferior one takes from mainly from the saccule and posterior semicircular canal. Also, for the postgraduates, you must remember there are 4 parts of the vestibular nucleus. The medial part is called as the Schwalbe's area. Superior part is called as the Bechetreau's area. This is for the postgraduates mainly, and the lateral part is called as the Dieter's area. All right, for the postgraduates, these are the names given to the part of the nucleus. All right, but for the undergraduates, how do the reflex take place? हमारा movement हुआ head का, stimulation of the vestibular system, impulses will go from the vestibular nerve to the vestibular ganglion, which is the Scarpa's ganglion, from there to the vestibular nucleus. All right, is that thing clear? Very good. So I think vestibular system you have understood. It is very simple, बिल्कुल difficult नहीं है. 3 semicircular canals हैं. तीनों semicircular canals जो हैं वो हमारे 3 dimension में है, तो वो हमारे लिए 3 dimensional या angular या rotational acceleration में हमारी body का equilibrium maintain करते हैं. उसके नीचे है utricle and saccule. This utricle and saccule both are responsible for our linear acceleration. Saccule is vertical, utricle is horizontal. All right. जब भी हमारी बॉडी के अंदर मूवमेंट होता है तो अंदर हेयर सेल्स होते हैं जो मूव करते हैं. 2 टाइप के हेयर सेल है, फ्लास्क शेप के टाइप 1 एंड सिलेंडर शेप के टाइप 2. इनके ऊपर में होता है जेलाटिनस मटेरियल और ये एंडोलिम्फ के अंदर में बेद कर रहे होते हैं और एंडोलिम्फ के अंदर में होता है खूब सारा पोटेशियम. सो व्हाट हैपेंस इज व्हेन दे ब्रश, व्हाट विल हैपन, जब ये ब्रश करते हैं नीचे पोटेशियम चैनल्स हैं वो खुल जाते हैं, पोटेशियम अंदर चला जाता है, और जब इतना पोटेशियम चला जाए कि रेस्टिंग मेम्ब्रेन पोटेंशियल 85 मिलीवोल्ट से ऊपर चला जाए तो वो एक्शन पोटेंशियल में कन्वर्ट हो जाता है and it gives rise to depolarization of the cell and release of glutamate, which is a neurotransmitter, और वो impulse की तरह जाता है through the vestibular nerve into the vestibular ganglion and from the ganglion to the vestibular nucleus, where as a reflex it will come back to the eye and will cause nystagmus, or to the body, vestibulospinal tracts, which will cause balance of the body. अरे अरे गिरना नहीं है, अरे सीधा बैठना है, अरे सडनली कार को ब्रेक लग गया तो हमें आगे गिरना नहीं है, हम स्टॉप हो जाएंगे. Right? So vestibulospinal and vestibulo-ocular reflexes are like that. Very simple. If you have any doubts in this lecture, please leave in the comments. I will be happy to share to answer those questions. Thank you.